Hi, everybody. Welcome again to Ivy English. I'm Bruce.
I'm Angela.
And I'm Wesley.
Today, October 14th, we are still in the middle of this great month of October. We have an article here for you called Vulnerability is the Key to Happiness.
我们的中文标题是脆弱，幸福的隐藏能量。
And if you don't believe that, listen as we read through the whole article and then explain it for you. Brené Brown's TED Talk, The Power of Vulnerability, is one of the most viewed talks in the world. Brown, a research professor, studies and discusses human nature, covering topics such as courage, shame, and perception. What is it about this talk that keeps people returning to it again and again? In researching shame, or what she refers to as the fear of disconnection, Brown found that people fell into one of two categories. They either had a strong sense of love and belonging, or struggled to find it. The only thing that divided the groups was that the former simply felt that they were worthy of love and belonging. This feeling of worthiness served as a stepping stone for many more positive qualities. Brown explained that this group, knowing that they belonged, had the courage to be imperfect. Furthermore, this allowed them to be kind to themselves and compassionate towards others. They were also able to fully embrace vulnerability because they believed that what made them vulnerable was what made them beautiful. Initially, Brown was confused by this because she had associated vulnerability with fear and shame. However, her research showed that it was also an important part of attaining joy and love. Investigating this further, Brown realized that when people try to control or fight vulnerability, they block their emotions, personal growth, and sense of self. What Brown wants people to do is accept that they are vulnerable and believe that they are enough. By doing so, people then become kinder and nicer to each other as well as themselves.
Yeah, when this talk came out, I was very impressed by it because it's a connection. She made a connection here that people hadn't made before. It's a truly new insight, and that's, I think, why her talk took off.
好，所以这个一开始的时候呢，这个 talk 刚出来的时候呢 ，Angela 老师她有看到，她觉得真的不错哈，因为一般人不会把这个 vulnerability 跟你的 power 想在一起。
Yeah, well, the connection between shame, vulnerability, and worthiness was a connection I hadn't made before. And actually, this conversation about shame is something that my friends and I talk about a lot in terms of parental upbringing. How instilling a sense of shame is seen as part of good upbringing, and yet it's so very damaging to your sense of worthiness. And so shame in raising children, we're constantly discussing whether or not this is something that should be done, whether this is part of good education or not. I mean, in the past, shame has been considered a major tool for raising children well, especially in Taiwan, and because these are the friends I'm talking about this with. At the same time, Brené Brown comes along and says that, yeah, having a sense of shame prevents you from being open and loving people and being able to develop yourself and believe in the people around you. And we're like, wow, okay, so there's a big thing to be discussed here, and there's a lot to digest.
Yeah, 好，那这个刚刚 Angela 老师讲的，其实在过去啊，很多父母教养小孩的时候呢，都会用 shame 用羞耻用丢脸这样的一个概念来教育小孩，就是你不可以丢脸啊，或者你这样真是丢脸啊，那让小孩觉得说这个 shame 是一个很负面的一种事情啊。但是事实上，我们看到的 Brené Brown 他把这个 shame 跟你的 worthiness 把它结合起来啊，就是告诉你说没有there's nothing to be ashamed of。那就是所以没有什么好丢脸的这个还有他从里面找到正面的能量，这是 相当不容易的事情。所以大家现在开始就重新思考 shame 在教养里面它到底应该扮演怎么样的角色。
So our first sentence of the paragraph says, Brené Brown's TED Talk, The Power of Vulnerability, is one of the most viewed talks in the world. And originally it wasn't even like a main TED Talk, it was a TEDx talk, which became so big that TED had to put it on their main site.
所以原来它只是个 TEDx 的一个 talk， 但是后来因为太受欢迎了，所以 TED 就把它放到他们的这个主要网站上面，变成一个 TED Talk。所以 Brené Brown 他的这个TED Talk， 这个 The Power of Vulnerability 就是这个脆弱的力量，它是这个 the most viewed 就是最多人观看的一个 talks in the world 之一啊，也就还有它是世界上最多人观看的一个这个 talks 之一。
Brown, a research professor, studies and discusses human nature. So now we know who she is and what she does. She's a research professor. She studies things that make her wonder what is the reality of this and that. And her this and that is human nature. How do people communicate with each other? How do they view things? And she has gone very deeply and personally into this subject.
好，所以呢 Brown 童伟格告诉你，他是一个 research professor， 他是一个研究教授啊，所以他不必负责那么多的教学啊。那他怎么样呢？他 studies， 他研究，然后 discusses， 探讨或者探究 human nature 人性啊。那 covering 分词告诉你，它涵盖了 topics， 它涵盖了他的研究跟他探究的范围涵盖了这些 topics。 那什么样的 topics 呢？ Topics such as 例如 courage， 他研究什么叫勇气， shame 什么叫做羞耻，什么叫做 perception 感知，那这些都是 human nature。
So what is it about this talk that keeps people returning to it again and again? What makes people want to keep listening to this talk? And honestly, I have had to listen to it several times to really try to absorb what she's saying. I think it's just because it's such a new insight. It's so fresh to us.
所以呢，这个地方我们看到他说 What is it？ 到底是什么东西 about this talk？ 到底是什么有关这个演讲的？到底是什么东西 that 会使得keeps people 会让人们 returning to it 一直回头看重新一看再看，像刚刚 Angela 讲说他看了好几次然后 again and again 就一再的回头再看。所以到底这个演讲有什么东西会让人们一直不断的一遍又一遍的看。
In researching shame, or what she refers to as the fear of disconnection, Brown found that people fell into one of two categories. So in her studies as a research professor, the topic of shame interested her, and she felt that the word makes people feel shame, and perhaps if we understood it as not something completely negative, its reality, it's a fear of disconnection, that you don't want to be separated from other people. And then she developed this idea that people are either of one type or another type.
好，所以呢 in researching shame， 当他在研究 shame 的时候，或者是你如果不叫 shame 的话，童伟格告诉你 or what she refers to as 就是他所称为的 the fear of disconnection， 对于失去连结的这个害怕。好，所以他把 shame 定义成为所谓什么叫 shame， 什么叫羞耻，什么叫羞愧呢？就是你害怕失去连结所以在研究 shame 或者是他所称为对于失去连结的害怕的时候呢，这个 Brown found that 他发现到人们 fell into 就是可以分成，后面通常就是个什么样的 categories。 好，所以人们可以分成 one of two categories， 人们可以分成两个分类之一的其中一个。好，那这样讲中文不顺，所以中文这个地方讲说，英文讲说 people fell into one of two categories， 那中文很简单就可以说人分成两类。
They either had a strong sense of love and belonging, that was one category, or they struggled to find it, that was the other category. So either people loved themselves, they knew who they were, they knew that they belonged to the people that they were with, or they struggled to feel loved and struggled to feel like they belonged to the people that they were with.
所以 they either 要么就是 had a strong sense of love and belonging， 要么就是他们有很强的爱还有归属感。sense of belonging 就是归属感。他们要么就是有很强的爱跟归属感， or 再不然就是 struggled to find it， struggle to do something 就是很艰难的很努力的想要得到什么东西。那你也可以说他们就换句话说他们很难 find it， 很难找到爱跟归属感。所以他们一直挣扎，一直很努力的想要找到，但是对他们来讲蛮困难的。
The only thing that divided the groups was that the former, those who had a strong sense of love and belonging, simply felt that they were worthy of love and belonging. They didn't hate themselves. We will find out that they realize they're not perfect, but they can or should be appreciated for who they are because they can appreciate themselves.
OK， 好，所以 the only thing 唯一的一件事情 that divided the groups 唯一区分这两类的人，唯一用来区分的是什么样 was that 他们之间的区别了，唯一就是怎么样，唯一的区别就是 the former 就是有很强烈的爱跟 belonging 这一群人 simply felt that 他们很单纯的就是觉得 they were worthy of love 他们很值得被爱，然后呢 they were worthy of belonging 他们也很这个值得能够有归属感。
So this feeling of worthiness, this feeling that they were worth something, that they were, worthiness is so hard to explain, honestly. It's a sense that you are a valid person in the world, that you are real, and that your beingness has a positive impact on the world.
I'm okay, you're okay.
Yeah. And so this served as a stepping stone for many more positive qualities. If something serves as a stepping stone, it leads you on to be able to do other things. If you believe that who you are is worth being, then you will be able to do many other cool and interesting things. Well, cool and interesting is not the right way to say this. You will be able to do other things that are valuable.
好，所以 this feeling of worthiness 就是这种值得这种有价值的感觉就是我是值得的，我在这里是有目的的那这个所以刚刚 Bruce 老讲说 I'm okay, you're okay I'm okay 就是我不是完美的，但是我接受我是这样的一个人。那所谓的接受就是我是有我的价值的，我不是完美，但是我有我的价值，我接受我，那我也接受你你也不是完美的，但是我觉得你也有你存在的价值所以就是这种 worthiness 就是I may not be perfect 但是呢我是这个值得被爱，值得这个 belonging sense of belonging 所以这种有价值的感觉 served as有什么什么的作用？有什么作用呢？有一个 stepping stone 一个踏脚石就它可以这个让你通往哪里一个途径所以它是一个踏脚石 for many more 更多的 positive qualities 正向的一些特质所以你首先要肯定自我存在的价值，你才会有其他更多正向的价值。
Brown explained, as she continued her research and then talked in the TED Talk, that this group, the ones who knew they belonged and they believed in themselves, had the courage to be imperfect. They realize they're not perfect, but they can improve themselves. It's not a reason to give up.
好，所以这个 Brown explained 说 this group 就是这个觉得自己有 worthiness 的这一群人呢knowing that they belonged 他们知道他们是有归属的他不完美，可是他有归属的，所以他们就 had the courage 因此他们有这个勇气 to be imperfect 他们有这勇气成为不完美的人，因为他知道说我虽然不完美，可是我还是有我的价值，我还是值得拥有爱，值得有归属。
Furthermore, not only did they have the courage to be imperfect, but this imperfection, the sense of their own imperfection, allowed them to be kind to themselves and compassionate towards others. Because if you can accept that you are not perfect, if you can accept that you have faults, you can be like, yeah, I have faults, but that's okay. And therefore, you have faults, but that's okay too.
Yeah, 就像刚刚 Bruce 老师讲 I'm okay, you're okay. 所以呢，因为这种想法呢，所以就 allowed them to 就可以允许或者让他们能够 be kind to themselves. 他们可以对自己要好一点啊，不要一天到晚苛责自己啊，哪个地方自己做的不好就一直我怎么这么笨，我怎么这么不行啊？不需要，因为有些东西是你擅长的，有些东西是你不擅长的啊，而且人总是会犯错的，所以你了解这个之后，你就会对自己好一点，不会一天到晚找自己麻烦。好，同时也可以 compassionate towards others. Compassionate 就是有同情心的，所以你对其他人也会有同情心。你看到其他人不完美的地方或者做错的地方，你也会想说他们就是这个地方不够完美，没关系人没有完美的他们会做错事情，那只要知错能改就好了。
They were also able to fully embrace vulnerability, those who could be kind to themselves and realize they do belong to others and it's okay to be imperfect because that's human nature. They were able to fully embrace vulnerability because they believe that what made them vulnerable, allowing yourself to realize and to feel, okay, I'm imperfect, and that's human nature, so I'm not going to get down on myself or other people, was what made them beautiful. When other people...We used to describe this back in the 60s. Somebody was beautiful, and we did not mean good-looking. We meant that they had great character, they were friendly people, they were helpful people. The beautiful people were the ones you wanted to be around and learn from.
Yeah, 所以这个地方这个 beautiful 不是说美丽的意思，而是说抽象的那种美丽，不是说长得美丽，而是你人格或者人性或者作为一个人你是美的。好，所以我们看到这个句，他说他们也能够怎么样 fully embrace， 他们可以完整的、可以完全的拥抱他们的这个 vulnerability， 就是他们可以接受他们的 vulnerability。
It's a hard word to say
这个很容易因为我就一直讲 vulnerable 那个字所以这个字呢，大家多念几次。好，那我想，然后他说，因为呢，他们相信呢，会使得他们脆弱的，其实就是让他们美的部分那这一部分呢其实不容易解释但是我现在看来我就觉得就是你能够接受自己的脆弱，其实那就是一种美所以这个你会有脆弱的地方，就表示你是个正常的人，那就表示你是个 beautiful 的人因为这个如果说你要求自己一切都完美，完全没有脆弱的地方的话，那你就不是一个这个真正的you're not true to yourself.
I mean, this has been said in other places. Perfection is not beauty. If you see a human face that's perfectly symmetrical and perfectly proportionate, they don't look human.
Exactly.
So that it's that line that's out of place that makes somebody takes them from merely symmetrical to beautiful.
Yeah. 所以这个就像 Angel 老师刚刚讲的，这个完美其实这个不是真正的美，真正的美一定多多少少会有点缺陷，它才会真正的美。因为如果完美的话，它就这种东西也可以说是不存在的。这种思考很有趣就例如说，就让我想到有人讲说，这个death is what makes life beautiful。你会死才会让你的生命更美。
Yeah.
你如果说永远不会死的话，你生命就没有什么珍贵的地方。类似这种逻辑辩证。所以大家可以去，我建议大家可以去看看这个 TED Talk 非常有趣，而且有很多你值得思考的事情。
You'd be joining the 62 million other people who have viewed this talk.
所以另外还有这个6200万人已经看过这个了，所以你可以加入他们看一看，他会给你一些新的启示。
So initially, Brown was confused by the idea that it's your vulnerability, the thing, your imperfection, that makes you beautiful. She was confused by this because she herself had thought that vulnerability was the same thing, was something that should be feared and shamed. She had associated vulnerability with fear and shame. To associate A with B is to say that A equals B. So if you're vulnerable,that's bad. That's something you should be afraid of and you should be ashamed about.
好，所以 initially 就是一开始的时候通常暗示着后来他有改变他的想法。所以一开始的时候呢 ，Brown was confused， 他 觉得很困惑哈 by this， 为什么呢？因为 she had 用过去完整式表示在她想通之前，她会怎么样？她会 associated 就是 connected 这个 vulnerability 就是把这个脆弱呢跟什么连在一起呢？跟 fear 跟恐惧跟 shame 联想在一起因为你为什么会恐惧？为什么会觉得很羞耻呢？因为你有一些脆弱的地方。
However, her research showed that it was also an important part of attaining joy and love. Realizing your vulnerability and accepting your fear and shame. This is the way to feeling better about yourself. You can accept your faults. You can accept your weaknesses, your vulnerability and shame. And that allows you to participate in love of yourself and others.
所以但是呢我们讲到 initially 嘛所以后来他改变了他的 research 他的研究显示说 it was also 就是你的这个脆弱呢也是一个 important part 是一个很重要的部分 of attaining 获得 attain 就是获得 joy and love 你能够获得欢乐获得爱那你的脆弱其实也是很重要的你就是因为有一些脆弱的部分你才能够得到 joy 才能够得到 love 这个其实有很多大家可以去联想的部分
Investigating this further, or looking into this further, Brown realized that when people try to control or fight vulnerability, when they try to be like, yeah, I'm not vulnerable, they also block their own emotions. They block their personal growth and their sense of self. So by trying to control what you feel is what you are ashamed about yourself, you actually cut yourself off from growing and becoming who you are.
所以 investigating 这个是个分词构句他探索 this further 他进一步的探索之后呢 Brown realized that 他了解到说当人们想要 control 要控制或者 fight 或者是这个对抗脆弱的时候呢他们会 block their emotions 他们反而会阻挡或者屏蔽了他们的情绪也会 block 他们的 personal growth 也会阻挡他们个人的成长因为成长很多时候是了解你自己的脆弱之后你要么就是接受它要么就是你去改善它最后获得了成长但所以你如果说你不能够去这个接受你的脆弱反而是要控制或者去抗拒它的时候你反而会阻止你个人的成长同时也会 block 他们的 sense of self 就是自我的感觉
What Brown wants people to do is accept that they are vulnerable.It's okay to be vulnerable and believe that they are enough. You don't need more than who you are.
好，所以 Brown 想要人们做的事情是要 accept 要接受说 they are vulnerable 他们是脆弱的是有弱点的然后呢 believe that they are enough 就是相信他们够了They are enough 意思就是说他们本身就够了他不需要 They don't need anything else 来告诉自己说我值得你就说我的存在就是值得的我一定有一些值得的地方
I like that. You don't need more than who you are. That was really well said.
Yeah.
And because by doing so, by just being who you are and not trying to be more or, you know what I mean, like make yourself anything else, then you can become kinder and nicer to other people.As well as yourself. Because you're not competing and putting other people down and all that horrible stuff. You're
Pretending.
you're just being who you are. And that allows the people around you to be who they are. And everyone just can relax.
Yeah.
And enjoy each
and
other.
enjoy each other. Yeah.
的确就是你要接受自己的脆弱接受自己的弱点就接受 who you are 跟自己先at peace 先和谈的你才能够跟别人这个和平的相处所以这里说 by doing so 你如果能这样做的话呢人们就会 become kinder and nicer to each other 彼此就会更和善更好同时呢 as well as themselves 就是他们也会对自己更 kind 更 nice
Okay, that's it. There's a lot to think about here, and as Angela has suggested, if you can tune into that TED Talk, and you might have to listen to it a few times to really grow with it, to understand it, well, then do so. It won't hurt you. Okay, that's it for today's lesson. We have one more this month, but it's at the three of us have one more lesson this month at the end of this month. We hope you'll join us for that and all the other great teams that work together for you here at Ivy.